after the shadows of the past, a new chapter begins.
A man in the shadows. To defeat a hydra, you must do more than sever its head. You must understand its heart.
Sherlock Holmes, from a private note to Mycroft. For nearly a year, the world mourned Sherlock Holmes. His name became legend, his death a tragic end. Poets wrote verses, the press eulogized him, and Baker Street remained eerily silent. But beneath the veil of mourning, Sherlock Holmes was very much alive, hidden, in disguise, and already 3 steps ahead of his enemies. Holmes had faked his death at the Reichenbach Falls, using Moriarty's own arrogance against him. After a brutal struggle atop the cliff, he had anticipated Moriarty's final move and prepared. The struggle was real. The fall was not. Holmes had used the Japanese system of Baratsu, a blend of martial arts he had mastered in secret, and a concealed climbing rope tied hours before Watson arrived. While Watson ran for help, Holmes descended, circled the waterfall's base, and vanished into the forested shadows of Switzerland. Holmes adopted multiple identities: Sigerson, a Norwegian explorer; Claremont, a deaf French violinist; Mr. Vosper, an elderly English gentleman. In each form, Holmes gathered intel, tracked surviving members of Moriarty's organization, and followed whispers of a more sinister group, the Septem Consortium. One man knew Holmes was alive: his older brother, Mycroft Holmes. Through secret correspondence, Mycroft aided Holmes from London, providing cover identities, diplomatic papers, and encrypted messages hidden in Parliament transcripts. Holmes's first direct strike came in Naples, where one of Moriarty's top smugglers, Giovanni Vasari, was caught after a fire broke out in his villa. Pinned to his chest was a silver playing card, the Queen of Spades, a calling card. The game was not over. Not all operations went smoothly. In Vienna, Holmes was nearly assassinated by a female agent known only as the Whispering Blade. But Holmes recognized her perfume, night jasmine, a scent he had created himself. 2 years after his fake death, Sherlock Holmes stepped back onto English soil, unseen, unknown, and unwelcome. London had changed, but Holmes had a plan. One quiet evening, a young boy delivered a folded paper to Watson with one line: "Come alone, come quickly, bring no weapon. S.H." Watson followed. And there, cloaked in shadows, violin in hand, was Sherlock Holmes, alive. Reunion and reckoning. No triumph is greater than the triumph of truth over deceit. Sherlock Holmes. The long-awaited reunion. The moment Watson saw Holmes emerge from the shadows, a flood of emotions swept over him. Shock, relief, joy, and a torrent of questions. Holmes's eyes, sharper and more piercing than ever, held the same calm certainty. "Watson," he said softly. The game was never over, only hidden. Watson struggled to believe what he saw. The man he thought lost was here, standing before him, alive and ready. "How? Why?" Watson asked breathlessly. "Too much to explain," Holmes replied. "But there is no time. The Septem Consortium tightens its grip. Planning the campaign. In the quiet safety of 221B, the old team reunited." Holmes laid out the diary and notes he had gathered during his exile. Names, dates, locations, and the blueprint of the consortium's plans. The group was vast. Industrialists controlling weapons manufacturing, politicians manipulating war fronts, secret financiers pulling economic strings. Their goal was nothing less than a global conflict, engineered for profit and power. "They seek to ignite a war between England and Germany," Holmes warned. "A war that will engulf all of Europe." The gathering of allies. Holmes and Watson began to reach out quietly to trusted friends. Inspector Lestrade, skeptical but loyal, ready to act if given proof. Mrs. Hudson, who provided cover and hospitality. Mary Morstan, Watson's wife, who insisted on helping despite the danger. Mycroft, whose government contacts provided vital intelligence. Together, they formed a covert task force determined to stop the consortium before it could unleash chaos. Infiltration in Vienna. The first target, Baron von Gruner's heavily guarded estate. Holmes, Watson, and a small team traveled under assumed identities. Inside the estate, they uncovered blueprints for a new class of weapon, deadly, silent, and untraceable. Holmes, posing as an arms dealer, managed to get close to von Gruner during a gala. The tension was palpable. Every word was a test, every gesture a calculation. In a daring gamble, Holmes challenged von Gruner to a game of chess, an old habit to gauge a man's character and patience. "Checkmate," Holmes whispered in victory. "Your empire will fall." The battle of minds and shadows. Back in London, the consortium fought back hard. Anonymous threats, sabotage, attempts on Holmes's life. But Holmes was always 2 steps ahead, using cryptic codes, hidden messages in newspapers, and the smallest of clues. He began to unravel the consortium's plans piece by piece. Watson chronicled every moment, every narrow escape, every brilliant deduction. It was not just a battle of strength, Watson wrote. It was a war of intellect, patience, and unyielding courage. A race against time. As tensions escalated in Europe, Holmes received word that a secret summit was scheduled, a meeting where the consortium would finalize their strategy. The location was a fortress in the Swiss Alps. Holmes and Watson prepared for their most dangerous mission yet, to infiltrate the summit, expose the conspirators, and prevent the outbreak of war. "The final problem is no longer just ours," Holmes said. "It is the problem of all mankind."
The Summit of Shadows. In the heart of darkness, the smallest spark can ignite the greatest fire. Sherlock Holmes. Arrival at the fortress. The Swiss Alps loomed like silent sentinels as Holmes and Watson approached the fortress under the cover of twilight. Their disguises were impeccable. Holmes as a wealthy art collector from Italy, Watson as his personal physician. The fortress was perched on a sheer cliff, surrounded by icy peaks and guarded by men whose loyalty was bought with gold and fear. Every step they took echoed with the knowledge that failure meant not just death, but the ignition of war. Inside the fortress, the interior was a maze of ornate halls, hidden passages, and heavily guarded rooms. Holmes moved with practiced ease, his eyes constantly scanning for exits, listening for whispers, decoding the patterns of guards' patrols. Watson kept close, ready with his medical bag, prepared for any sudden violence. They attended the lavish reception where the consortium's leaders mingled, exchanging coded words hidden beneath polite smiles. The chessboard comes alive. Holmes found himself face to face with the 7 men of the Septem Consortium, each a master of their dark craft, industrial magnates, shadowy politicians, secret financiers. The air was thick with danger. Holmes's eyes locked on the one man who commanded the room, a figure known only as the Cardinal. "So, Mr. Sigerson," the Cardinal said, smiling thinly, "your reputation precedes you." Holmes responded with a subtle smile. "The game is far from over, Your Eminence." The secret meeting. Holmes and Watson slipped away under the pretense of inspecting the fortress's art collection. In a hidden chamber, they discovered maps, blueprints, and coded documents detailing planned sabotage of key railroads, arms shipments to extremist groups, propaganda campaigns aimed to ignite ethnic tensions. Holmes worked furiously to photograph and memorize every detail. The betrayal. Just as they prepared to leave, a silent alarm was triggered. The Whispering Blade's protégé, a shadowy figure cloaked in black, confronted them. A fierce fight erupted in the narrow corridors. Holmes's Baritsu against a storm of knives and poisons. Watson, fighting valiantly, was nearly overwhelmed until Holmes delivered a cunning blow that knocked their assailant into the freezing abyss outside the fortress walls.
The escape. With guards alerted, Holmes and Watson raced through secret tunnels carved into the mountainside. The chase was relentless. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the fortress in a white shroud. Using a hidden rope ladder, Holmes descended sheer cliffs and led Watson across treacherous ice fields. Their breaths came in ragged gasps as they escaped into the cold, carrying the weight of evidence that could stop a war. A glimmer of hope. Back in London, Holmes presented the evidence to Mycroft and Lestrade. The revelations were staggering, exposing high-level corruption and plans that threatened millions of lives. It was a turning point. The final problem is not just a battle of men, Holmes said. It is a battle for the soul of humanity.
The consortium strikes back. The Septem Consortium was furious about the breach. They unleashed a brutal campaign of retaliation. Anonymous threats, sabotage of Holmes's safe houses, and an assassination attempt on Watson shattered the fragile calm. Holmes and Watson found themselves on the run, pursued by mercenaries and corrupted police. At one point, Holmes cleverly staged a fake death to confuse the enemy, disappearing into the London fog. Meanwhile, the consortium's propaganda machine spread lies about Holmes and Watson, trying to turn public opinion against them. But Holmes's sharp mind was unbreakable. Using coded messages and secret allies, they stayed one step ahead, gathering more evidence. Deeper conspiracies and new allies. As the pursuit intensified, Holmes uncovered evidence of a second, even more secretive faction controlling parts of the consortium. This shadow group had infiltrated governments and intelligence agencies. Holmes contacted former rivals and allies alike, master thieves, spies, and scholars, to create a network of resistance. Together, they decrypted secret communications and intercepted weapons shipments. In one daring operation, Holmes and Watson stole a shipment of explosives meant for a major terrorist attack. Their success boosted morale, but the danger grew more intense. The final confrontation. The climax unfolded in a remote manner in the Scottish Highlands. Holmes had lured the consortium's leaders into a trap, using fake documents and misleading intelligence. A fierce battle of wits began. Holmes outmaneuvered their plans, exposed traitors, and foiled assassination attempts. In a tense showdown, Holmes confronted the Cardinal himself. The fight was brutal, both physical and psychological, pushing Holmes to his limits. In the end, Holmes emerged victorious but severely wounded. The consortium was shattered, its leaders arrested or in hiding. Aftermath and legacy. The world breathed a sigh of relief. Holmes and Watson recovered in a quiet countryside estate. The evidence they uncovered led to sweeping reforms and international cooperation to prevent such conspiracies again. Holmes reflected on the cost of victory, the sacrifices, the dangers, and the fragile peace they had won. Watson wrote the full story, ensuring the world would never forget the final problem, the greatest challenge the detective ever faced. For every problem solved, another waits, Holmes mused. But today we have won the day.